Welcome back to Live from Paris here on France 24. It's time now for business news. William Edwards is here, and we're going to start with that news that Peugeot Citroën is cutting 8,000 jobs in France.
Yeah, a big blow for the French economy. Politically in France, of course, this is going to be a big story, but in particular, of course, for those 8,000 workers who are now going to be without a job, it seems, from September onwards. 200 million euros a month, though, is what the chairman of Peugeot Citroën says they are losing in cash each and every month, $200 million, so euros, I should say. So there you go. But let's look at how Peugeot Citroën got into the state that it's in now.
The figures are bleak. At Peugeot Citroën, sales for the first quarter of this year were down 13% from last. The car maker relies on its European sales. 60% of its vehicles are sold on the continent, more than that of Renault, its nearest rival. As the region struggled with the debt crisis, so too has PSA, who, unlike Renault, hasn't been investing in any low-cost options.
PSA have gone for a more high-performance car, like with the DS brand. But it's tough because other manufacturers, notably in Germany, have been doing that for years, and it takes time to perfect. To spend 25, 30, even 35,000 euros on a new car isn't a simple decision, and we're seeing more buyers heading for cheaper options.
Nearly half of Peugeot's cars are made here in France, and high operating costs have made it tough to realise a profit. Also, fewer French people are buying French cars. Just over half of the French market goes to domestic manufacturers, 20% to Renault, the rest to Peugeot. The remainder is dominated by foreign brands, particularly German makes.
Lots of my colleagues advised me to buy a German car. They're a lot more reliable than French ones.
I used to have a French car.
And now you have a German one?
Yes, because it uses less petrol and emits less CO2, better performance, less consumption.
Despite government loans and state-backed buying schemes, Peugeot's not been able to pull itself out of trouble. The car maker says it's currently losing 200 million euros a month.
Now, in among all of this, a lot of people have been talking about how things are so much better done across the border in Germany. Volkswagen, for example, is being held up as a bit of an example there. But it's not all rosy, is it? There's a lot of car makers in trouble.
Yeah, well, Opel in particular is in trouble at the moment. Now, of course, they are in theory a German company, but of course their parent company is General Motors in America. So you could maybe blame the American influence, I suppose, if you're a German, saying because a lot of the German car makers are doing very well. Opel is really the exception in Germany. Their CEO, in fact, has stepped down. Now, Carl Friedrich Stracker, I should say, he has stepped down as CEO of General Motors' European arm. That includes Vauxhall as well in the UK. Only 2 weeks ago, he presented the latest restructuring plan for Opel and Vauxhall itself. Apparently, some at the top of the company, though, were frustrated with the slow pace of change. And elsewhere in Europe, there have also been problems and rumblings of discontent. The head of Fiat, he said that they will have one factory too many if things don't pick up in the European market in the near future. Like Renault and Peugeot Citroën, they rely a lot on the European market. And meanwhile, Renault boss Carlos Ghosn, he has said that the first major restructuring plan in the EU by a company could set off others. Basically, other companies could take the same route. As soon as someone jumps that hoop, as Peugeot Citroën now seems to have done, we could be seeing others following on.
OK, more broadly then in Europe, we're not really finishing the week on a happy note, are we, sort of economically speaking?
I'm afraid not. No, I mean, as far as the currency itself is concerned, the euro has now hit a 2-year low against the dollar in recent trading, with €1 worth $1.22.
Good for the tourists.
Good for the tourists, I suppose. So good for exports, that sort of thing. But meanwhile, Italy, has faced a downgrade from Moody's, the ratings agency, and that is just as it goes to borrow on the markets. Now, to talk about this, we're now joined by a correspondent in Milan, Seema Gupta. Seema, thanks for joining us. This couldn't have really come at a worse time for Italy, could it?
Exactly. I mean, the timing is just really unfortunate. You've got the government, the downgrade coming just before the government is hoping to sell 5.25 billion euros of medium and long-term government bonds later this Friday. There had been some hope. The borrowing costs had fallen at a bond auction yesterday. It was positive because basically on the idea that there had been progress on Spain's bank bailout, as well as that deal by EU leaders investors to use those rescue funds to buy bonds. And so yesterday's sale went well. And while there is a realization that the situation is fragile, the hope was that it would go well. And now you have this downgrade. Now Moody's downgrade puts Italian government bonds just 2 notches above junk status, and they warned that they could even cut it further, saying that Italy remains vulnerable to political shocks, and specifically that could be in reference to if there's a possible Greek exit of the euro, and if in the case Spain needs even more aid, and also the fact that the Italian economy is expected to contract in this year. And so with all these kinds of fears in place, Moody's has put in place this downgrade, and they want to see, even though the government has passed all those reforms, they want to see the government of Prime Minister Mario Monti implement and actualize those reforms. And until they do, they've decided to downgrade the situation. So really, the timing really couldn't have been worse, as you said.
Now, you mentioned Prime Minister Mario Monti just then, but there have been reports, haven't there, in the Italian media that Silvio Berlusconi, his predecessor, could be seeing a return.
Yes, exactly. And that, in a way, if there is this possible comeback by Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, the former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, this, of course, is unnerving those investors and those EU authorities that had sort of pushed for his removal back in November last year. At that time, if you remember, those benchmark yields in government bonds were at an all-time high. And Prime Minister Mario Monti came into the situation leading this technocrat government. He was seen as a former EU commissioner, hopefully saving the situation. But now with the thought that Mr. Berlusconi may come back, that is also going to unnerve investors.
OK, Seema Gupta, thank you very much for joining us.
OK, right, well, let's move on now. All this week we've been keeping an eye on the Farnborough International Air Show. Now with the event coming to a close, the sales figures are in for the 2 giants of the airline industry. Let's take a look at how Airbus and Boeing did this year.
Grey skies and a cooling off of business at this year's Farnborough International Air Show. The show saw Boeing claw back lost ground over its European rival, Airbus. Boeing has secured a total of 396 orders worth $37 billion, far overshadowing Airbus's orders worth nearly $17 billion. Sales that represent some relief for Boeing after Airbus made a grand slam last year, cinching nearly $50 billion more in orders than the U.S. manufacturer. One boost this year for Boeing came from United Airlines, who has said it will buy 150 of Boeing's 737s to replace older, less fuel-efficient planes. For its part, Airbus says it hopes to sell a total of 300 aircraft this year. So far, only 4 of its 380 planes have been sold. But the European manufacturer says its target is far more for the super jumbo plane.
The goal remains 30 aircraft for the year, and I still think it's possible to do it.
Overall orders are down, with Boeing and Airbus together securing only about half what they secured last year. A decline that's no surprise given the hit of a faltering economy and lower government spending. But for some analysts, less demand has an upside, allowing both Boeing and Airbus to respond to previous orders.
And let's just finish with a quick look at how the markets are performing over in Asia, where there is news that China's growth has cooled somewhat in the second quarter. Nevertheless, the figures were slightly better than expected, so you can see quite a bit of growth across the board there.
OK, great. Thanks very much, Will Edwards, with that business news update. That rounds off this half hour of news on Live from Paris. But do stay with us, taking a short break, and then Lorna Shaddick's back with more news and headlines for you.